Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian Farmhart's Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Monday, March 21st. So, a little bit of a choppy day, I would say, to kind of just give you a quick overview of what I thought today was like. First of all, risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only. You could read the full risk disclaimer right down here. But yes, just to kind of talk about how today unfolded. We kind of started off with, I had a lot of alerts placed from, the homework that we do over the weekend and looking for setups, and just had a ton of alerts go off in the first 10 minutes as everything kind of moved up for the day, and then things kind of settled back down a little bit. A lot of names, particularly in the growth space, kind of popped and then they dropped a little bit, but they didn't drop down too far. They just kind of settled in. Some of them gave back the early gains, and then we kind of began to see which areas of the market wanted to outperform for the day. So Qs, which I actually haven't read here, but I could actually take that off because it wasn't that bad. Let me just remove this. Just down 40 basis points. So, again, a little bit of chop. Also, if you look on the left of your screen, market breadth was kind of just in a little bit of a funk all day today. It wasn't very it wasn't very strong. The breadth indicated just what I've already mentioned, chop today. So there was a little bit of volatility around Powell speaking again. And we'll talk a little bit about the interest rates. But as far as advancers and decliners go, in the Dow you had 16 decliners, 14 advancers. S&P you had 315 decliners, 186 advancers, and in the NASDAQ 18, so just about double that from the advancers, 966 advancing, 1858. So what do we always say? What's our analogy when you have a little bit more difficult market breadth, where you've got more decliners versus advancers? This was more of a day where the wind was in your face in terms of stock picking versus the wind is at your back, right? Whenever we've got an expansion in breadth, like we had most of last week, it's a little bit easier to be a stock picker. So let's talk about what we identified, which were the strong themes of the day. And, it's interesting because if you go back and if you look at what outperformed last week, you had some beaten up areas really outperform. Even forgetting about the Chinese internet ETF just for a second, we're going to skip that one for today. You had things like the blockchain stocks, pot stocks, clean energy stocks, the internet stocks, all of, big relative underperformers for the year really outperformed quite a bit. And even some things that were kind of depressed a little bit in the recent, weeks, such as consumer discretionary, semiconductors, those had a huge week, up 9%. And one of the things, and I put this on Twitter, and we talked a little bit about it in the macro video this weekend, was, hey, remember last week was index rebalancing. What do they do for index rebalancing, right? A lot of times what they have to do is that they have to buy the underperformers and they have to sell the outperformers, right? Because it's basically footing all the indices, which are mostly market cap weighted. There's some equally weighted indices too, but the names that have excelled and outperformed, right, they have to get foot back to where their normal market cap benchmark weights are, right? And again, this happens in March, it happens in June, September, December. So it's logical that some of these areas outperformed because they had to get bought, because they've been the underperformers, right? So they have to get moved up in the indices. So that has taken place. Right, that was done as of last week. There was a lot of pre-positioning, I think, for that too. That kind of helped that group. Also, a lot of short covering. Right, we heard about that. That there was, a gamma move too last week, so that contributed to things. But if you look at the underperformers for the week, right, you had oil services, you had energy. Finally, these things really took a breather last week. And again, they may have had to be sold because they've been this year's outperformers, right? So let's move to what happened today. right? And if you look at some of these groups, and one of the ones that I was kind of focused on for the day is the agriculture space. They've just been so strong, right? So if we look at things like CF Industries, I thought, after this red candle, one of the things that I said was you might need a little bit of time to consolidate this move, but I'll tell you, it didn't take long, and right out to new highs, right? NTR was a name that we saw call activity in today. That's what I participated in. I didn't think it was up that much. I did have to chase it a little bit because I think it was up about 2%. These things, they got going very quickly right out of the gate. Just to go through more of this group, and the ETF that we've been talking about, which I think is better than the MOO ETF, MOO, is this global agriculture ETF, and it's a catchy little symbol. It's veggie, but again, you go across this group. Archer Daniels Midland had a good day too. The whole group is hot right now on what's going on with global tensions, inflation. All of that. This is a group that has been excelling, and every time there's some consolidation in the last 3 or 4 months, it's resolved higher. If you are a classic trend trader, that is what I classify myself as, right? These are things that we continue to go back to until they don't work, right? So for example, classic trend trading is when something is moving like this, right? Trending up, right? And making more and more new highs. That's what we want to see stocks do, is come out and make new highs. It's one of the most bullish things that could happen, right? So when a name makes new highs, right? And then this thing kind of comes in and settles into either the 5 or the 20-day moving average, and then continues to resolve higher. Here's another one. Here's another one. Right. So again, the whole group has been doing this, all of 2022, and a little bit into last year. Right. So it's been that's why I wanted to kind of start with this group, because it's just worked so well. Right. And of course, this was on our we had these names on our weekend watch list too, as well as Dow and Deere, which also look like really nice charts as well. But this is how we kind of set ourselves up going into the week. Always our weekend watch list is a starting point. This one as well. I mean, it's amazing, up 10%, right? I know retail investors are still looking at so many of the growth stocks of 2020, 2021, but this Alcoa, and I put this out on Twitter, hours ago, this is, a 10% move for Alcoa. You just have to get used to that it's Alcoa and not a SaaS company, right? Not a software company, but this is where the momentum continues to be as well. This actually did not close at new highs, but I think that you see what I'm getting at, right? With this group, continues to be very strong. And if you want to look at the whole group right now, the metals and mining, right? Again, trending, right? Doing something much different than the majority of the market. Here was your, consolidation. Again, a little bumpy in this consolidation. Broke the 20-day moving average, kind of settled back in, started to resolve higher, and again, another 4% move. Things like Cleveland Cliffs up to new highs, right? Nucor out to new highs, right? So, and these are not all things that are, that are like recessionary. Like steel names are actually pretty expansionary, I think, for this market. So that's where the strength continues to be. And, we try to, really position in some of these things, as well as, of course, the energy names. I was long, Halliburton coming into today. So this was a nice gain for me. This was up 4%. Again, a little bit noisy in here, but gave a nice move into the 20-day moving average. Remember, I talked about probably one day last week, definitely for members, we talked about how Schlumberger saw call activity last week, and I kind of like the Halliburton trade a little bit more. So I jumped into Halliburton, right? And today I was able to take a couple targets in Halliburton. Here's one, here's another one, and I left the last piece on, right? Newmont was one too, speaking of metals and mining, another, again, don't they all look like we're going through different stocks, a couple different groups, but don't these charts all look the same, right? That's what you want to find. It doesn't, you should not really care too much if you're a technical trader what the symbol is, but if you're seeing the same pattern over and over, it's pattern recognition, and this is what's working right now. Now, again, we don't know how long, as we don't have crystal ball, and we don't know how these things are going to work, but they continue to do that. We saw a call buyer and a new one today that I haven't seen before, and I just felt like, because what I've been doing, and I was trying to describe this a little bit to members a little bit earlier in the day, but I end up I continue to kind of rotate in and out of some of these names. So for example, took a lot of targets in Halliburton. I got out of that Newmont position. So I'm okay going into a new name in that group if it's not extended. So this is one too. So doesn't it look like the same thing, right? Just a little bit earlier, right, in this move. So here was your pushback to the 20-day moving average, starting to kind of consolidate, and now moved higher today, up 7%. But I'm looking for this thing to get up to 23.98, right? And then there's another VPOC. So again, it's just a pattern, right? Now it may not fulfill its pattern, but that's what the risk is in the trade, right? That's that you're taking a chance whenever you take a trade. 22.56, right? So this is. And I'm not even sure how to pronounce this name, Vermilion Energy, but it looks good. There's positioning in it, and so on and so forth. So that trade, I'm in the money in a little bit. We talked about NTR. Tech Resources is another one too, being that I took off Newmont, right? So again, it's kind of, I was explaining this. You may find this analogy a little bit funny, but if you've ever played the card game Rummy 500, right? In Rummy 500, right, what you constantly have to do is discard, right? You could pick up more than one card if you like, but you still have to discard. So right now I find this market, right, especially on days like this where it's choppy, is it's not a market to keep accumulating positions or keep accumulating cards in your hand. Again, Gin Rummy is a little bit different than the game I'm describing, which is Rummy 500. If you don't understand this analogy, don't worry about it. I think you'll figure it out. But you just don't want to be holding a ton of positions in a choppier tape, right? And that's kind of what we have. We had a really good tape, a very strong tape last week with breadth expansion, but it could be a lot of days like this where there's a couple groups that are outperforming and some other groups that are going to be rotated in and out of, and so on and so forth. So I think that's important. And then what I like to do as well is just rotate in and out of, put some cards down, like the Halliburton trade today and the Newmont, and then pick up a new trade or two. But meanwhile, keeping my exposure somewhat balanced. That's how I'm trying to trade that market. We'll see how it works. A couple other, we'll see if it continues like this. A couple other groups that also strong that saw some option activity is another one that kind of looks similar to some of those patterns we've already gone through. But Lockheed Martin saw some calls, I think, out to September. I would watch. I did not take this trade. I would watch 444, right? And then there's a VPOC up here at 449, right? And then NOC saw some weekly calls too, right? There is a 1 hour VPOC up here that could act as like a little bit of a speed bump. But again, I like the chart in here. And then if you go through these other ones, GD and RTX, Raytheon, they all look similar, right? So the group is really strong. They're somewhat moving together. And, these are the trades that are working right now. Now, again, of course, you have to keep in mind that a lot of these are a little bit driven on what's going on with Ukraine and Russia, so that you have to keep that in mind. And that's why, like, I keep discarding, and selling some swing trades. But yeah, I find it very interesting that after everything kind of rallied last week, the value groups continue to run with the ball. The couple other concepts that I wanted to talk about here too was what happened with bonds today, right? And Jerome Powell speaking. I think that if you look at what's going on with bonds going lower, rates going higher, right? A lot of people talking about what's going on here with the yield curve inverting, right? So meaning that the 10-year right now is 2.29, and some of the things like the 3-year, the 7-year are yielding a little bit higher. So you have an inverted yield curve when you look at those treasuries. Keep in mind when you go further out to the 30, that's above all of these. So again, it depends on the maturities. I'm not an expert on inverted yield curves, but I do know that when yields go higher, it does create a headwind for especially like growth names at any cost, right? And if you look at, for example, like the ARK ETF, just as a proxy, now this didn't lose this bounce, but I think if you're worried about what's going on in the rates, this is a possible trade to say, okay, I'm going to go short ARK or long SARK, which is what I'm doing right now, because I think they have the biggest headwind. Growth at any cost, I think, is a way that I'm playing this right now, to be short a little bit of this group versus long, things that are acting a bit better. Now, one of the things that I found most interesting last week was, some growth really acted well, and we haven't really seen too many names within these groups act better, but NVIDIA is one of those names, up another 1% after a big week last week. Now, granted, they have their investor day tomorrow, so sometimes for when there's a widely anticipated investor day, which tomorrow is for NVIDIA, sometimes it's buy the rumor, sell the news. So I would be careful of that tomorrow. Like, I took some profits, even though I didn't have a big position in NVIDIA. I took some profits in that one. Just 270 versus 260. That was a trade that I added right at the end of last week, and yeah, we'll kind of see how that goes. What else was I looking at in terms of other groups? I think just have to kind of prove it in terms of being able to kind of show some strength to it. I'm just going over my list. The cyber group continues to act well. We're hearing more about cyber attacks. So Palo Alto, had a decent day today. It looks like it was flat, but keep in mind, like this is a pretty good looking chart for now, even if it pushes back a little bit, right? TENB is another name that keeps coming up for me. Right, this is Tenable Holdings, right? So there are some things that are acting okay in here. They're just not, in my opinion, acting as well as some of those other groups that I talked about. I wanted to talk about one more thing, and then we'll end the video for today. But S&P, where we are right now is at the 200-day moving average. We are still a little bit extended here. At this point, I wouldn't mind if we actually come in a little bit. Right, notice how far we are above this week's value area. One of the things that I said in the macro video this weekend was that I wouldn't be surprised at some point if we come in and touch the top of value for the week, right? So I think that that's possible. I also think that this virgin point of control gets taken out. Remember, when I refer to these, I try to explain these because I always get questions, right? We're using volume at price, and I'm using a proprietary indicator called the market webs. What the market webs allow me to do is to find out when something is trending and when it's in price discovery. So for this week, we're above value. This value area is representative of all the volume at price from last week. So we're in price discovery for the week, and we're going to actually hit a previous, if we continue moving up a little bit higher, we're going to be continuing to we're going to be hitting a virgin point of control. This is a point of control, a big area of volume that we have not revisited. Sometimes they could act, the price kind of stops climbing after you take one of these out, or stops going down after taking one of these out. So 4488 would be that level to say, okay, maybe I want to be a little bit of a seller into that because the next one up isn't up until 4676. All right, so that's what we'll be watching tomorrow. We'll talk more about that pre-market session tomorrow. Guys, have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow.